on the chat feature itself, I I I don't think there's like a way I can be able to quantify the efficiency. I think the only way I'll be able to quantify the efficiency will be on the like the benchmarks that were set, right?
Is there a risk to AI reasoning, right? Because, like, I think of it as then we don't have to give it all the right answers, but we trust it to use a reasoning mechanism to come up with the right answers. Why do countries always find something to bicker about? They are like bitter siblings, like twins who can never agree on who holds the remote for a TV station. And it doesn't make sense. There are AI models, there are AI disruptors, and then there is DeepSeek, the model that has sent shockwaves throughout the entire history and industry of AI, leaving analysts scrambling, companies reeling, and markets shifting overnight. In the world of artificial intelligence, speed has become everything, and DeepSeek, it's faster, it's cheaper, and more efficient than anyone expected it to be. Built, as they say, in probably just 2 months with only $6 million, it has been hailed as a technical marvel, an engineering anomaly, and depending on who you ask, a calculated copycat. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In the wake of its rise, stocks have tanked, questions have surfaced, and battle lines have been drawn. OpenAI, Microsoft, Meta, and Nvidia have all taken financial hits, and yet DeepSeek, a Chinese developed AI, hasn't faced the same scrutiny as TikTok. And why is that? And here is another puzzle. DeepSeek is open source, no subscriptions, no paywalls. So, what's the business model? Where's the money? And how does it plan to sustain itself in an industry where monetization has become king? Today, we are diving deep into the technical breakthroughs, financial shockwaves, geopolitical tensions, and the future implications of DeepSeek and AI in general. Is this the next big thing or just the latest in a long line of overhyped AI projects? My guest today is Brain. Brain Abaah-Djutornu is a research assistant and an MSc computer science student at the University of Idaho, specializing in wireless communication protocols and systems. His research focuses on advancing wireless technologies to enhance connectivity and communication efficiently. Before transitioning into research, Brain worked as a telecommunications core network engineer at Huawei Technologies, where he contributed to voice over IP communication, cloud core networks, and 5G node development, alongside supporting wireless access project deliveries. Beyond his technical expertise, and this touches on where exactly I know Brain from. Brain has a strong background in debate and leadership. He previously served as the president of the KNUST Debate Society, fostering critical thinking and communication skills among students. Passionate about promoting network and technology access in Africa, Brain is dedicated to leveraging his expertise to bridge the digital divide and drive technological innovation across the continent. And so, ladies and gentlemen listening to this podcast, welcome Brain Abaah-Djutornu. Brain, you're welcome to the podcast.
And
uh,
thank you. I mean, I was waiting for when you were going to invite me into the
ah,
podcast, and I think it's my time to shine.
this is my time to shine. But yeah, it's been quite a long while. What have you been up to? How has school been? And and if somebody should ask, what are the major differences you're uncovering with exploring technology in a foreign country versus exploring technology in Ghana? What are the key differences that you can point to?
To be honest, I think it's kind of like been an eye opener, right?
Yeah,
Because um a lot of the things I've learned in Ghana, right from school, like from KNST, a lot had been like very theoretical, right? And the thing was I constantly ask myself questions like, what am I going to need these things for? Or how am I going to implement them and stuff like that? But I think coming here, like it depends on like the kind of degree you're
yeah,
doing and what exactly you're going in for. Because I'm like in more of a research degree, right? So I don't really use the practical as much, but you still get like a clear picture and understanding what exactly these things are were geared to use for. So you get like a practical application. So if I'm learning data structures in class or something, I understand that like this is why we need data structures to be able to optimize programs or software and stuff like that. And I think that's the thing. That's what I'm learning here. That's what I'm constantly learning here. And I think I appreciate that a lot more. And I think generally above that, like I think professors, yeah, are much more open. Like they are much more open to like listen to students. Like so it's easier to learn. Like it
Yeah,
fosters that learning environment. I think maybe the problem in Ghana might be the class sizes, but then again, it's much easier over here.
yeah. And I'm sure you, with your debate background, you relish just asking questions and talking and inquiring about stuff. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, 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 to be honest. Yeah.
Okay.
Asking questions is great.
Yeah, it's definitely great. Let's get to the reason why this episode is happening. Last week, I was there lying down, and I started seeing people talking about something on their statuses. Like, obviously, the first status post I saw on WhatsApp, I didn't care. Like, what's DeepSeek? Like, maybe somebody found something, like some
Yeah.
random product somewhere, and then they made a post about it. But then, within the space of about an hour, about 20 different people on my timeline just kept talking about DeepSeek. I'm like, exactly what is this? Because I have work, I'm working, I'm busy, I'm not really paying attention to the news within the week. And so I just go online and search DeepSeek and then realize, something rocked someone's boat somewhere. No wonder people are jubilating. And so
Yeah.
AI is definitely moving at light speed, right? And a new player has entered the race, which is DeepSeek here. Some say it's the next big leap in artificial intelligence. Others say it's just another short-lived hype cycle like OpenAI. But what exactly is DeepSeek, and why is it being compared to OpenAI's ChatGPT models, Microsoft's Copilot, and Meta's Llama? And more importantly, what makes it stand out from these other models?
Okay, so I think so. First of all, like, what is
Yeah,
DeepSeek? So there's not really like I don't think they've come out to say, okay, this is where the company started from. Like, not that I have seen yet,
yeah,
but like grapevines would be like, oh, they started from like a hedge fund that decided to like pivot into research, like a Chinese like hedge fund that decided to pivot into
yeah.
research and researching like models and like large language models and like AI research, right? And I think their goal is to reach that AGI, like artificial generated like intelligence, like sort of level,
Yeah.
right? But basically, the reason why they were able to make those headwaves and shockwaves all across was the ability to train models at like lower cost than what exists.
Okay.
Because what we've been told, right? What we've been made to understand is that um, to be able to train like very good models, you need high levels of computational resource,
Yeah.
right? That's what everybody knows now, right? So it means that if you didn't have like the the GPUs, like the high-end GPUs, like Nvidia GPUs and whatnot, you weren't able to going to be able to make these models function as well or pass these benchmarks as best as possible.
Yeah.
And DeepSeek came out, and I think I went back to look at their papers, and I think they set out to say this right from the start that their goal is to this thing reduce the cost in training models, and I think that's what they set out to do. And then once they hit that aha moment, they were like, yeah, it's time to rock boats. And then I think they succeeded in doing that. To be
Yeah.
honest,
Um, People have described it as very revolutionary, and sometimes I just wonder whether it's just because it's new. Because I've tried it, and funny thing, I think for the past 2 days when I tried doing something on it, it says that like there are so many people using it, and so it's probably at its bandwidth. So you'd have to wait. Basically, you are waiting in line for other people to stop using it before you get to use it. And is it truly the hype? Like, does it meet the hype, or is it just because it's new and everybody's flooding over it?
yeah, I think the bandwidth issue will probably come from like everybody flagging
Yeah,
it, because I think ChatGPT also faced the same issue when they came out like with their very first
yeah,
model in ChatGPT. Like it got to times when you have to wait to be able to even have access to it, even if you had an account and
yeah,
whatnot, right? So I think, yeah, the hype has like attributed to people, a lot more people, um wanting to use the platform and see like what is actually happening,
Yeah.
right? But I think outside of that, we still have to give them the credit, right? Because to be honest, if constantly everything we've been told in this like AI race, right? In this like race for large language models and everything was that computational resource is key,
Yeah.
right? So we need more resources to be able to train better models. And someone comes and says, no, that's not true. Like I can do this for cheaper and I can still meet your benchmarks. Then it probably begs to say, okay, yeah, then there might be something in here. Then let's look at
Yeah.
it. And I think more of the people that, and that raises the question, like, so more of the people that actually want to use these platforms, I doubt it's because they want to learn or use it. They want to see
It
what's
is.
like, see how it really is, and then trying to compare it with ChatGPT or the Llama model or whatever, right? So I think yeah, they do have something revolutionary on their hands because once you've been able to cut out that cost factor, I think like they should be given that credit because yeah, they've really done something
Yeah.
about it.
I've watched several news coverage on this, and a lot of the time, people's description of it is that it is faster, it is more efficient, it's a deep thinker, it's far better than ChatGPT. From a user's point of view, because I'm sure you've used it, you've tried it, from a user's point of view,
Yeah.
do you notice a significant difference or any difference at all between using DeepSeek and using ChatGPT?
Um, to be honest, I think when during the time I used it, like I was just trying to like find out basically what's like how it runs
Yeah.
and everything. So I started with like data has been trained on that and all of those things. Found out like from the model itself, it said he had been like the data it had been trained on was up to I think October 2023. So it still has
Okay.
that like it still has a lot of data that it still has the data gap that it still has to learn on.
Yeah.
Efficiency, I think efficiency, like largely on efficiency, right? On the chat feature itself, I I don't think there's like a way I can be able to quantify the efficiency. I think the only way I'll be able to quantify the efficiency will be on the like the benchmarks that were set, right? So I look at the benchmarks that they presented in their papers, right, and then compare them with like third party like benchmarking and true to their word, their benchmarks like are meeting like the third party benchmarks and what they presented in their paper are quite the same.
Yeah.
So I think on efficiency, then it brings us back to the whole cost thing, right? So it means that they did well to be able to efficiently train their model and bring something great, right? But I think on the human factor, I think probably what I'll attribute that to is like how they did their training right on their data because the way they did their training was that they purely right from the start, right? So we have to understand that the model, the R1 model that was out
Yeah.
there that has like improved reasoning capability wasn't a fresh model, right? It wasn't something they started from
Okay.
scratch. It was it was from a previous model they had
Okay.
developed, right? And then from that model, then they decided to use like a reinforcement learning, like a different type of then because there are two types. You could either like present the model with like data like that, like fine-tune data and
Yeah.
see this is the answer I want, or you could use like a different learning and say instead of me giving you the data, you give me your answers, and then I'll tell you whether this answer
Oh,
is
okay.
correct or not, and then you learn from that, right? So, and that's what they sought out to do, right? So that was their basis, right? So I think for like that reasoning capability for them to be able to grow like their reasoning on such like with such limited cost, right, and computational ability was what I think would maybe inform the humanness of the results. But then again, it'll be very difficult to quantify because ChatGPT again, once again, like with their newer models are doing extremely well in like also achieving these results.
Yeah.
The only difference here is the cost,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Two follow up questions
Yeah.
from this. The first one is you've mentioned the
Yeah.
source of information to sort of measure these benchmarks are from DeepSeek themselves, and their
Yeah.
research papers. And the question is, can we trust an organization's own assessment of themselves? as opposed to, especially given that now, like you say, a lot of people out there don't even know exactly what they are doing, where they came from. They can't really confirm, they can't tell, they've not been able to run their independent research to validate these benchmarks as to whether they meet them. The only way we can do this is to look at it from the back. From the back door is to look at it through their own research papers. So, should we take these assessments with a pinch of salt, or based on the interface and some of the things that you've interacted with, you think, yeah, even if there are some shortfalls, it's not that huge. They are actually hitting the targets to a decent extent.
I think they were clever enough to foresee things like this, right? Questions like this, and I think that's why they, yeah, and I think that's why they decided to open source the work,
Yeah,
right? Because like when they open source the work, they put it out there for anybody to take it and say, hey, look, we are not like hiding whatever we are doing behind like some veil of secrecy or whatever.
yeah,
This is what we are doing, and I think they've been doing this like right from like because when you told me that, oh, you wanted us to do an episode on it, I
yeah.
was like, I don't want to come in like disappoint. So I went back to read like from their version 1.5, right? And like right from their version
Yeah,
1.5, like they started talking about the GPUs they were using,
yeah,
right? Then from there, then they moved on to like the hours it took to
yeah.
train. Then they moved to like the cost it took to train. So like they've been very open
Oh,
on it.
okay,
And then they keep saying like in order to foster like the research space and grow research, they are open sourcing it. So then if anybody can take it and say, are these guys lying? Are these guys telling
okay.
the truth? And I think that's what has literally helped
Okay,
them. Yeah.
okay. The second question I had, in terms of follow up, is you mentioned the two, let's say, strategies of training a model. The first strategy being giving it highly fine tuned information and data to consume. And then the second one, reinforcing answers, as in if it's correct, you reinforce it, if it's wrong, you downplay it. Given that they use the reinforcement mechanism, how efficient is that? Because then I'm thinking, I would, from a user's point of view, I'll probably feel a lot more comfortable if I know AI is giving all the right answers, and when I ask it, it's just going to pour out those right answers to me, versus a thinking model where there are reinforcement mechanisms that were used. How expansive do these reinforcement trainings cover? And can we trust it? Or should we always be skeptical of the answers that AI give us? And if we should, then why all the hype and frenzy about it to begin with?
So I think for based on my perspective, right, and why I think the reinforcement thing sounds great is because if if we constantly train like AI based on or like these large language models based on like the data we give it and
Yeah.
see this is the answer we want, right? Then we miss out on that reasoning capability that we want to be able to grow,
Okay.
right? Because we have to understand that like the goal of DeepSeek, right, was to build on the reasoning capability, the ability for the model to reason through its process and see like be able to stop and say, okay, now maybe I'm doing something wrong. I have to like go back and then like reevaluate my answers. And I think they even got to the point where they saw that like they had like in their paper they described as like an aha moment where
Okay.
it was asked to prove something like a math equation, and as it was going, it realized that no. Then it went back
Started
to like
again.
wait, then went back to get start all over again to be able to derive the answer. And I think they do this brilliantly. And the way they do this is so they have like a separate model, right? Where they so when they had the base, the V3, they started with like a previous model with the
Yeah.
V3. So when they had that base, then they started purely reinforcement learning, right? So
Okay.
what they had done was that they had like a reward model that would reward like answers after the model gives out its
Yeah.
answers. But then what they did differently was that this time instead of saying, okay, this answer is correct, this answer is wrong, discard all the other answers, they let the reward model ascribe like points to like
Oh,
a group of answers that the model brings
okay.
out, right? So if you say you bring out like five answers, then it ascribes like maybe one is correct, and then like the lower it gets is wrong, right? So maybe 1, 0.4, zero point 0.8, zero point
Yeah.
0.5. And then the model looks at that and then says, okay, these are correct, these are wrong. Then it learns from
Okay.
it. It learns from the and like yeah, so that's what they did. And I think that helped them because once they got to that aha moments, then basically we are seeing that then we can be able to develop like further develop and further fine-tune the machine's ability to reason without necessarily giving them the answer directly,
Yeah.
right? And I think that like that's the ultimate goal, right? To be able to have machines ability or like to be able to reason and think through like problems without just spitting out answers, right?
Yeah. The final question on this is there a risk to AI reasoning, right? Because like I think of it as then we sort of we don't have to give it all the right answers, but we trust it to use a reasoning mechanism to come up with the right answers, right? And does that mean there's some form of a risk in that process that users should always be aware of, that this is reasoning on its own and it might not always come up with the right answer for whatever question you ask? Because I don't think AI developers, maybe I may be wrong, but I don't think AI developers can predict every single potential use case scenario of that AI, right? And so people use it for
Yeah.
all sorts of things. And if you are training it on reasoning and eventually you don't go on a particular reasoning line, I think this will probably be the better question. If you train it on a data set or reasoning mechanisms that doesn't cover a specific issue, and somebody asks it about that issue, technically, how would it go about thinking about it, given that it's probably never encountered it before, and answering that person?
I think that's one of the that's one of the like biggest issues facing like large language
Yeah,
models, like the problem of like
yeah,
hallucinations, right? So like you ask a model something, and you ask like ChatGPT something and say, yes, I know about XYZ. Then it begins like bring out like all sorts of things and say this is the answer, right? But you look at it and
yeah,
like, no, not really. Like that's not what I mean,
yeah,
right? And I think that's one of the issues that's facing like large language models. There are certain like models, like I think Claude from Anthropic, right?
yeah,
I think Claude wouldn't give you an answer if it doesn't know an answer. And I think that's what they set out to do. Like that was their goal,
yeah,
right? To like Anthropic, I think it was like I think something on um equity, equality, like one of those things, like basically like fair AI, right?
yeah,
So for their model, it doesn't do those things. If it doesn't have an answer, it's going to tell it doesn't have an answer, or it's not in the capacity to be able to answer. But outside of that, I think yeah, like we can't still have instances where um because we can't account for everything. Like we can't account for the intention of every single
yeah,
person, right? So these are questions that we'll still need to be able to answer. But I think it's actually a step in like one direction where at least like we give something to like to the machine, and instead of it like going off on a tangent of like spewing things that it has no idea about. Now, instead of it just spewing things it has no idea about, it's able to like reason or think like how a human being would
yeah,
like think about something, right? So provided it has like some little context about something, it can say, okay, per the context I have about this, probably this is XYZ, right? As opposed to it saying total nonsense,
yeah,
right? But I mean, it's something we can be able to get to. I think that's what we are trying to get to,
yeah.
right? The whole AGI like point, right? And I think we can get there. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, okay, cool. Let's get away a little bit from AI and people using it. One thing I don't get about all of this is how some people are losing money. Like, yeah, somebody is successful. What's the point? Continue your success. And that's, I think that has been one of the biggest reasons why this has been such a major conversation, because you look at OpenAI, you look at Meta, you look at Microsoft, you look at Nvidia, all of them have their stocks downhill, right? And it's like, it doesn't make sense to me. How does the success of one company translate into the downfall of another? And I don't know if you could explain exactly how the markets work in the tech world, because in my mind, if somebody is successful, hooray, continue their success, then let somebody also enjoy their trajectory. But now it's like somebody's success. automatically become somebody's downfall in financial sense.
So and this is the thing, right? So I was listening to like a podcast, like I think weights, it was on like the weights and biases like YouTube channel,
Yeah.
right? And like this guy was talking about how in the S&P 500, like seven companies accounts for like I think 33% of like the S&P 500 in the United States.
Okay.
And out of that, also even when you come to like the Nasdaq is like the tech stock, the tech stock index, right?
Yeah.
Also, there are like a few companies that control about 30, like a third of that, right? And when you look at these companies, each of these companies, what they realize, what I've seen or realized is that their golden goose is like cloud infrastructure.
Okay.
So Microsoft has Azure, Amazon has AWS, right? I don't know if Meta does Meta. I don't really know if Meta
Yeah.
has like a cloud platform. But like when you look at that has been their golden goose. And then that's without what like fuels like things from Nvidia, because these guys are wanting to like improve, because there's this assumption that if I don't grow my data centers and improve on my cloud computing, Microsoft is going to do it. So
Okay.
I need to beat Microsoft.
Okay.
So like that, so like Google, Microsoft, all of these companies are trying to build their infrastructure, right? And the reason why we saw that tank was because already there were claims that like Nvidia stocks already were overpriced, right?
Yeah.
People were like people like in the echo chamber somewhere, people were like Nvidia stocks are too overpriced. But then we have to also understand if that's the claim, right? Then it means that that bubble is it's very very shaky.
Yeah.
It's the slight change will disrupt anything within it. And that comes back to the competition and the cost thing, right? Because if everybody has been living off the assumption that Nvidia stocks are only going to rise because AI companies are always going to try to scale and scale and
Yeah.
scale, right? And because of what they've told us, for you to be able to scale your model, you need high compute resource. So we see the Stargates thing, for example, when these guys announced the six, I think 600 or 500 billion in dollars. Like I think it was Nvidia, Microsoft, I think Oracle and
Yeah.
OpenAI. They are and SoftBank. They announced that like and like a bunch of other companies that they are $500 billion into building data centers.
Oh, okay.
Right after that announcement, within that same week, was when DeepSeek released the R1 and released their benchmarks and everything, and say, look, we don't need this amount of money to be able to reach these benchmarks,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So now, because of how the stock market, because of how the stock market literally acts, these things act based on sentiment. So
Yeah.
you'd be like, okay, so it means in the future we will not need as much Nvidia stocks, as much Nvidia
Yeah.
GPUs as we have been made to believe, right? And these guys are already trading once, even when there was training their models, even when there was a ban on like China receiving the high-end Nvidia
Yeah.
GPUs, right? So all those things will cause people to want to sell, right? And that was what contributed to it. I think the only people that didn't suffer from the whole crash was Meta, I think Apple,
Yeah.
right? And I think Apple was because Apple was pushing this high idea of having like being able to have like models on your phone, running like models on your local resource, and that's literally what DeepSeek was aiming
Yeah.
for. I think Meta, sorry, didn't like see the hits because they started the whole open source thing.
Yeah.
Like the open source is one of the largest like dense models, right? So they didn't really see the impacts like that, right? But even moving aside from like the tech companies, the other people that's like so yeah, like moving us, like there are
Yeah.
people that were at there somewhere and they were also hit, like energy
Yeah.
companies, right? Because we have to understand that the whole thing was it's not just on GPUs, it's on energy,
Yeah.
right? It takes energy to be able to run all these
Oh,
data
okay.
centers. Right. So a lot of energy companies, like nuclear companies and all of those things, also saw their stocks being hit. So like that thing, that little thing from the small Chinese group that came out, like literally shake people,
This
like literally. And
this is one of these things where you're like, it's like you wish it was a kid that lived on your block that you could just walk down the street, catch them,
yeah,
and give them a heavy knock.
yes, I think there was this one thing. I think I saw this post on Twitter when like there was this I think like a researcher, like a lead from OpenAI came
Yeah.
out and was like, "Oh, it's a good thing to see that DeepSeek have come out with O- O1 like level benchmarks and stuff like that." And there was this like intern from DeepSeek that came out and was like, I think he quoted a tweet and was like, "So why didn't you open source yours? Like, so why didn't you do it?" Right? And then, like, so,
Yeah, I think
so like it's like a good day to be in the space,
a
right?
lot of people also just are happy that OpenAI is being hit because they felt when they came out initially and said they were non-profit and then eventually did a U-turn and said, well, they are ending the non-profit at some
Yeah.
point and then starting a for-profit. And it's like people, so people have always felt excluded from accessing the very best versions of ChatGPT. And so to have DeepSeek bring out the very best versions similar to the best versions of ChatGPT and open source it and make it free without any payments, they are like, aha, now now ChatGPT should be hit. So that they realize that excluding the masses was a problem. Yeah.
I think I'm not too sure like OpenAI is a publicly traded. I think if they were publicly
No,
traded, they would have been like
they would have been
down
down.
during that week. Yeah, yeah, they would have been down. Yeah.
Anyway, there are a few more questions I have on this technical aspect before we move to the reason why these two countries or these. In fact, I was watching a video yesterday and I also heard Vladimir Putin made a statement that whoever controls AI controls the world. And sometimes I just feel like nations make these statements unless maybe after this conversation we get to uncover exactly how AI is fundamental to some of the things that they do. Sometimes I just feel like they want to fuel each other's egos and just battle each other for something pointless. So let's finish up with this technical aspect. Um, DeepSeek says they used inferior versions of Nvidia's chips. They didn't use the best versions of Nvidia's chips because obviously of the ban. And at the time, the US's idea was to try and the notion was you can never achieve the levels of ChatGPT and OpenAI without these high-end chips. And so if they ban these high-end chips, then Chinese companies would always be 1 year or 2 years below. And these guys then decided to say, okay, maybe the hardship is probably the room to just find a way around it. And it is in finding a way around it that they've discovered an AI model that is as efficient as the best versions in the US, but uses much more inferior chips. At least that's what they claim. OpenAI also says it is they've copied them, right? In fact, Sam Altman somewhere in December made a tweet and said, "These guys literally, it's easier to copy something than to be the first person to do it and take the risk." And according to him, when DeepSeek started, when you go there and ask, "What model are you?" it responds by saying, "I am ChatGPT something something model," and all that. And so the question I'm asking is, can we actually trust if you look at the computing model and the efficiency, can you really, really trust that these guys used inferior versions of NVIDIA chips to do it?
So in their bid to be open source,
Yeah,
like so they put out, I think I think in their earlier like paper,
yeah,
I think the V1.5, the version
yeah,
1.5. What they said was that they trained on clusters of the A100 and the
yeah,
H800. Oh yeah, or 100. Yeah, I think one of them. I think the A100 is a high-end chip,
yeah,
right? It's a high-end GPU, right? So when I was reading that part, I was like, like how did you get it? Because like you released that paper in like I think somewhere in January
yeah,
2024, right? And what I know was that the ban was somewhere in like October 2022 thereabouts. So just for that A100 chip, right? A100 chip, it's a high-end model. It was part of the ones that were
yeah,
banned, right? So then my question was maybe they had like some sort of stocks or they saw into the future and were like, let's hide some of these things and then use them to trade. But like then again, we can't tell, right?
yeah,
Because we can only tell from what they give to us. And because of their whole claim that they are open source once again, it's forces us like there's that then there becomes that inclination to wants to trust
Yeah.
them, right? Because they put their model and everything out there. The other thing, and I think that's on the like the whole if you ask the model thing, like what it is, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you GPT, yeah. It was also because they said they trained it on XYZ data, but they don't tell us the data set. They don't
Yeah.
show us the data set. So then that begs the question, like, what data sets did they train? Because now you have to understand, like, in this day and age, what is going to become a commodity? And I think even previously, right, in terms of like art, the times where
Yeah.
like arts were like a big thing was data,
Yeah.
right? So like then that also becomes a question, like, what data sets were you training on? Because all they tell us was that they train on Chinese and English like data sets. They don't show us the data sets, and that's like another question
So they are not
that still
truly
needs to be
open
answered.
source.
But as to the chips, yeah, because like I mean, if you're open to like publish
Yeah.
the data and
They
let
are
us also
open
see the
source by
data it gives,
name.
right? Yes. So like publish the data and let us also see the data
Yeah.
set you use. And I think that's where the claim, that's where OpenAI can also make that claim and say, like probably they use our like these like parts of our models or they use like inputs from our models to be able to train
Yeah.
themselves. And I think that's also another question. So although they are open source, there are still a lot of questions we can ask because if the first of them if the ban was in 2022 and you release the paper in 2024 and you still have one of the GPUs in your cluster that was like part of the ban, then like where did you get it from, right?
Yeah.
So that's another question. And I think a lot of like the hype around the recent release has like removed attention from their previously released papers because when you go back to read their previously released papers then begin to ask yourself like all these questions
Yeah.
and those are things I asked myself and became like started uncovering,
Yeah.
right? Because they tell us like I think they tell us, oh, we've been able to develop a model that change like less, right? And that uses like less cost, blah blah blah, right? But then you go and look at it and be like, okay, so that 5.76 or $5.86 million that we're talking about was only for the V3. They don't talk about training costs
The
on the
R1.
R1, right? On the most recent one, right? Or the R1
Yeah.
zero. So and also in the paper, they talk about how, like, with the kind of like model that they like, the type of learning that they
Yeah.
use, you need to like expose it, to, like, train it more to be able to ensure that like you increase the reasoning capability.
Yeah.
So it probably means that
That's
six
also
million might have
yeah,
shot up,
cost
right?
intensive.
Right. Yeah, it might have shot up. Like, but we don't know how long they trained it for, right? They don't tell us how long they trained it for. So then that's also another question. So like probably it might have been cheaper,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it might have been cheaper than what's like than like the 6 billion OpenAI
Yeah.
raise or the 10 billion OpenAI like raise, right? But then again, it might not have
Six
been like
million.
as
Yeah.
cheap as you want us to
Yeah.
believe, right? Yeah, maybe you're like leading us on, but like it might have been cheaper. But
Yeah.
at least like if you are saying they are open, so I think they should also publish all of those things. Like so we trained it for this amount of hours for the RL and
Yeah.
all of those things, right?
I mean, this is quite interesting because I listen to the way in which the general media is pushing out these facts that is they only train it on 6 million. They use very inferior Nvidia chips, and I was wondering, are we really sure this is true? Because I know the general media would always want to be the ones to jump on the train because it's hot news, publish it and go away. But from what you are saying, and which is also one of the reasons why I was like, let's do an episode on it because I definitely, in fact, if I go and pick those papers, I won't read it and enjoy it. I won't read it and enjoy it. But you are interested in the space, you were already commenting on some of the things, and you felt, this guy is obviously reading way beyond what the average person is reading. So let's have a conversation about it. And like you're saying, you've seen that they were at some point using even higher end chips. The cost is not fully reported. And so which also means that the public has been led on, or the frenzy has been built on information that's sort of leading people on, basically. And those are the things that are making the headlines as well. So it's sort of like yeah, a little pinch of salt in here.
I think they do well. I think they do well to try to get that reaction, right? Because
Yeah,
when you take a look at their paper, right, like right after the abstract, I think right after the abstract, then the benchmarks are there. Like I think they did it for the V3. Like so, then the benchmarks
yeah,
are there. Like this is how we performed when you put us against others.
yeah,
So obviously, it's going to be like, hey, like do you get it? And then that's the question because they do a lot of training, and that's the truth. They do a lot of training
yeah,
because this is how they got a V3 to be that good, right? they built V3, trained it, right,
Mm.
with SFT, like the fine tuning, the supervised fine
Yeah.
tuning. Then they use V3 to train
Oh,
R10,
okay.
right? And then after they train R10, then they train R1 again
Okay.
with data like fine tuning and like a combination and everything. Then after they train R1, then they use R1 and distill it into V3.
Ah,
So they do a
okay.
lot of training,
Okay.
right? So, yeah, so they do a lot of
Okay.
training, right? And the only time they reported cost was on V3,
Yeah.
was on the paper they released on
Yeah.
V3. Nothing on cost was said on R1
R1
or
zero. Okay.
R10,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Interesting. And given that
Yeah. I
R1,
think the only reason,
yeah, given that R1 and R10 are probably much more powerful versions of their releases, it's also reasonable to think those ones could cost slightly more than V3. um, unless maybe they found some genius ways of doing it. But let's see, maybe in the coming weeks or days, the full information might come out, and, and then when it does, we can see exactly how it plays out.
yeah, I think we can only wait for the information. Like obviously, like the cost is going to be cheaper,
Yeah,
but I'm just guessing it's the reported cost is like
it's
slightly
off.
way lower than
Yeah.
what should be there. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned the word. You said R1 was distilled into V3. Distillation. I came across it when we are preparing for this episode. We'll talk about it down the line. And so if you are listening and you want to find out what distillation is, yeah, keep it up and continue listening. But there's one question I wanted to ask you. When TikTok became a global sensation, right? Like the US lawmakers rushed on it and said, security concerns, these guys are stealing our data and they are at risk. And they've banned them. They've banned TikTok from the US, regardless of how many US citizens were making money from it and monetizing their content and just using it for social benefit. They banned it, right? And they said it was mainly because it was owned by a Chinese company. In fact, Trump said they would try and give them 90 days to sell to a different owner. And if they sell it, then cool, TikTok can be operating. So why isn't there the same fear surrounding DeepSeek, right? Which is a Chinese developed model, which is sort of overtaking maybe ChatGPT from a user point of view, and a lot of people are interested in finding out exactly how it works. And because it doesn't have any paywalls, definitely people by default would want to use that because it gives them more advanced responses than a ChatGPT free version would give them. So why? Because I saw also President Donald Trump say, yeah, he comments the release, he thinks it's great, and he thinks it's a message for everyone in the industry. Why are they all of a sudden shifting their tone from the hostile approach to TikTok to a friendly approach to DeepSeek?
Oh, I don't think it's a hostile app. I don't think they are changing their tone. Like so, when you take the TikTok example for
Yeah.
example, right? What they had done was to wait, watch, observe, and then regulate,
Okay.
right? Like I think they tend to do a lot of those things,
Yeah.
right? So they wait and observe and then decide if whether or not they want to regulate. So if it gets out of their control, then say, hey, no, like let's lock it
Yeah.
down, right? And that's what they did with TikTok. When they saw like, hey, like even people like people in the US like want TikTok, like they love
Yeah.
it, right? And they were like, let's regulate it, like let's shut it down,
Yeah.
right? And I think DeepSeek just came, right? It was something that just came, and but the way they just came out, well, like we are open source, we are free, you can download locally, so it means like even when you shut off your internet, you can use it on your own setup. So it means like no information is going to be able to like seep through the internet and what have you. And there was a lot of quietness, like right. So you saw like even after the release, OpenAI was quiet for a
Yeah.
while until later on when they said, this might cause like some sort of problems. And we're like, these guys use our model to train their model. So they are, do you get so it's like I think that's just the general outlook from my point of view.
Yeah.
They wait and then watch, and then like when they watch and then they see, I think it's a high time we start regulating these guys. Then they go ahead to like start
Yeah.
regulating. I think probably that's what we might see. But I think once again, DeepSeek has that veil of protection that is open
Yeah.
source and that is
Yeah.
research because they are publishing their code, they are publishing their weights, they are publishing everything that they use to train the model, except the data sets that they've not shown us. So 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 then the question is what's the
Yeah,
problem, right? Because everything is out there in
yeah.
the open, right?
But
So
one question that just
so I
popped
think
up in
that's
my
it.
mind um, is it criminal or is it illegal to sort of train on other people's data sets? So for instance, if you use OpenAI's data or if you use OpenAI to train your model and you don't and you admit it, does that come with an offense? Is that an illegality? Because I'm trying to figure out exactly why they are hesitant to publish the data sets that they use to train their model. Or is it more of they don't want anyone else to also pick that data set and use it, which doesn't make sense if you're making it open source.
Yeah, so I think this will generally boil down like more like data privacy laws and stuff like that because like if OpenAI says like their data sets are proprietary because a lot of like these guys like starts like having like proprietary like data sets because some of them are trying to grow like in their vertical, not
Yeah,
like trying to do everything all at once. So you have like companies that are like trying to like grow in their vertical in terms of like law cases and like for legal work and stuff like
yeah,
that. So it all depends on like the kind of data you take. So if you go to take someone's data that is proprietary, then you might have some questions to
yeah,
answer, right? But if the data is all open source, then I like intuitively I'm not thinking it should be a problem. But I mean, if people want to cause issues
they
for
would
you,
always.
they will definitely cause
Yeah,
issues for you, right? There's no way you're going to like do right? Because look at what they did to TikTok.
yeah,
Like they've changed for them to change their CEO. They've moved from the Chinese like CEO to like a Singaporean CEO. All of this, but if they wanted to ban, they still ban them. They
yeah,
found a problem and then decided to ban them. So I think that's the thing. So like it's kind of like a thin line because if these things are out there in the public open, for example, then what is it? Because take X for example. On X, I can like get access to the X API, pay for it, and then like download as many tweets from X as
yeah,
possible and try to use it to train a
yeah,
model, right? It's legal. So these things all border on like very, very thin lines. And I think those are things that like regulators will have to start like looking
yeah.
into to try to like answer questions like this.
Okay, interesting. Um, why the fuss about AI? Like, I don't get it because these countries, these big countries, always pick something and make it a big deal. Out, it sometimes I don't get the frenzy because like they started with this whole arms race, then everybody stockpiling nuclear weapons, everybody stockpiling nuclear weapons. Then World War II happened. Then after that, okay, we stockpile nuclear weapons and we won't use it, but there's an arm race, but we don't want to go to war. Okay, then COVID came. There's a race to search for vaccine. There's a race to search for vaccine. Everybody wants to be the superpower after COVID. Okay, then we are done with that one. There are currency wars all over. The US dollars want to be the strong one. China wants to undermine the currency by forming BRICS and by manipulating its currency some way. Why do countries always find something to bicker about? They are like bitter siblings, like twins who can never agree on who holds the remote for a TV station. And, and it doesn't make sense. Why is AI becoming a race at this point?
I think first off, I have this theory that like in order to like avoid any sort of like mass distraction, they find things that they can compete on, right? So you take things like so you
You
take
don't
things
want to be
like
bored.
the yeah, so like the space race like
Yeah,
this, right? The space race was literally like how it started was like militaries like trying to show their military power, and
yeah.
then all of a sudden it turned out to who can go to space and come
You
back.
get
Like, how do you get there, right?
and they've
Exactly.
spent billions of
And
dollars on that
like when
too.
you
Billions of dollars. And Elon Musk
yes,
and his private company has done way more than all these space agencies of these countries have done. But they've been spending money on it for ego purposes.
Mhm. And like and that's one of the like biggest things because it's not just a space race. Take like the 5G
Yeah.
race, for example. Because I remember when we're debating in KNST,
5G
like
race,
we had to like read a lot on like 5G race, like
fourth
and like the
industrial
ban on
revolution.
Android use and whatever, right? Right, yeah. And this thing didn't just start, right? Because I went back again. I was like reading things on like
Yeah.
telecommunication and stuff like that, and I saw way back as like the 1940s. Huawei was like pushing like their own like their own GSM
Yeah.
architecture because then what was known by like Ericsson and like Nokia and the major players were like it was like a CDMA type of architecture. So it was like a very different telecommunication like
Yeah.
architecture. Huawei was then in the 90s like pushing their own like architecture, and it broke. Like they did it, and then like it
Yeah.
penetrated and became the
Yeah.
standard. And I think that's what everybody wants, right? For their technology to become the
Yeah.
standard. And the reason why I think, and I think AI might be it, right? AI can't be it because it has the potential to like advance a lot of industries
Yeah.
like healthcare, research, whatever. When we get to that point, when we get to that AGI or super AI like
Yeah.
point, right? Nothing can hold you back, literally, because what a lot of us now are being held back are probably something things like laws of physics and stuff like that. Once we're able to get to the point where we can compute these things
Yeah.
mathematically and have like intelligence that can be able to do these things at a fast pace, then it means that a lot of the things that we've been worried about will literally be non-existent,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's why AI can't be it. Because when you look at the various use cases like across board, some small company somewhere, sitting somewhere, will be developing something and see things like AI, and then it can and it has the ability to
Yeah.
disrupt like an entire industry. And that's why I think it's a thing, right? And looking at it now, I think what is going to happen is we are going to have this thing where there's going to be like how I like with the GSM CDMA thing, for
Yeah.
example, there's going to be like 2 points of divergence, right?
Yeah.
As to how exactly you want to go about things, right? Do you want to go about it like the distilled models, like smaller models kind of way, or the larger, denser models like open? Like these are questions that would be answered as we move
Yeah.
forward, right? And I think AI is the thing that these countries are looking for to be able to ensure their dominance on the global scale.
Yeah, because I think I mentioned this earlier in the episode that I read somewhere that Vladimir Putin said whoever controls AI controls the world, and I so there are two things I found out. If you look at the Russia Ukraine war, for instance, AI has become a major player in that war, especially with the use of drones. And the main reason is, we've all known that, oh, if there's a drone incoming, we've all seen on these movies, there's a jamming thing that they can use to jam the signal of the drone, and then all of a sudden the pilot loses control. What they've used and what they do now is to train the drone with AI models such that after the signal is jammed and it's already within a reasonable distance and it's already identified the target, it doesn't stop. So even though you've jammed the signal and the pilot has no more control, it just continues to destroy that target. And it's like it's increased the efficiency of the war way more because now an entire jamming system, whatever you built around it, is pointless. It doesn't work anymore. And so you are there, you think that I have a jam system, whatever drones, they should send it. And then all of a sudden you've jammed
Yep.
and you can see that the pilot has lost control. But then the drone is still coming, and you're like, exactly, what the hell is happening? And then your targets get destroyed as well. And similarly, people have also studied how AI is being used a lot more in decision making for for the war process, right? And I think they call it the kill chain or something, which is the process of gathering information, determining what is a target, determining whether or not which of these targets is the most strategic to hit, and all that. And then a human eventually uses that data to approve. And now there are a lot of armies who are installing AI models in their processes. So you get a lot of pictures sent in, and they've trained the model such that the model identifies this is a tanker, this is a missile, this is a weapons base, and they do all that, and then go like, per the data we have this amount of ammunition available, we have this amount of fuel, we have this amount of people. You need these resources to take out this target, that target, or this target. And within a day, they would have analyzed an entire war field, picked up strategic positions, and made it very easy. Something that would have taken about 10,000 people to do back then to analyze information intelligence behind typewriters. Pak, 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 pak. Now, all of a sudden, AI does it in minutes for these army generals. And it's like it's changing a whole lot, right? Which also sort of opens up the mind into exactly how why countries care about this. I learned the US is actually doing a special the US Army is actually on a special project to train a very, very efficient model for the cases of war, just to simplify the kill chain and make it highly specific, such that when they go to take someone out, they're able to do it very, very easily. And and it seems like seems to be the motivation, or the army and empowering their war ego seems to be the motivation for all of these things.
I think yeah, because I think it boils down to even as far back as like
Yeah,
nuclear thing, right? Everybody like that whole idea of mutually assured destruction is a huge incentive for
yeah,
everybody. Right? It's a very huge incentive. I mean, like although I'm like, that leaves my country Ghana sitting somewhere. Like, what is their place in all of this? Like, because what are we going to do?
bro.
And like those are questions I keep asking
See, let me tell
myself.
you something. Yesterday, I was listening to one of the veterans. I think the veteran of the labor minister designate, and they were talking about he wanted to talk about remote work and working online and all that. Bro, the term wasn't even coming. The term, you know how he said it, working in absentia. And I'm like, how how is this person, like, see, credit them for all their expertise and their education and all that. But how is this person, our labor minister, in charge of creating jobs for a youthful population in a tech based world? Like, how? Charlie.
See, the thing they need to do like overall. That's like an entirely different conversation. I don't even want to get into. So let's not go
The,
there.
the
I beg you.
generations, when they say generations are wildly apart, people don't get it. Because, like, you and I know the possibility of remote work, of even
Yeah.
even sometimes these programs that you get to enroll on online, and then eventually it changes your life. And someone says working in absentia, like, remote work is the basic term you would expect anyone to know in that field. I don't want to say it's vetting pressure, but yeah, let's put it aside. Sorry. Any, anyway, people have raised questions about the monetization of DeepSeek. Like, how do they make their money, right? Because we know that OpenAI eventually turned for profits by putting, what do you call it, payment walls, um, and then making some of their advanced models paid for. And I wanted to ask, like, how does DeepSeek make money? Because even if it's not that expensive, at least we know they've invested around $6 million. So how do they get that money back?
So I think there can be multiple ways, right? Because if it ends up being like the pride and glory of
Yeah,
China, it probably means they are going to get like some sort of like
funding.
government
Yeah,
funding from the Chinese, yeah, from the Chinese government. I think outside of that, what I've seen is that like a lot of like open source companies like establish consortiums and organizations and stuff like that to raise funds, right? But then it's going to be like fundraising on like an incredible scale because the kind of scale it will take to maintain this thing
yeah,
will be incredible. It's not like you're maintaining like a library, like a Python library or
yeah,
something. So those are the things, right? Because if they want to still toe down the open source line, open source route, they might probably need like a lot of like funding either from the Chinese government or from like establishing the consortium. They are going to be private and like get like donations and
yeah,
stuff like that. I think companies like um even in China, I think Huawei has thrived on like using a lot of open source material to build their
yeah,
systems. But like they get their money back because they are vendors, they are selling a
yeah,
product, right? So maybe you might see like an instance where DeepSeek like morphs into like selling of products or selling of products or services and stuff like
yeah,
that. But then there's going to be another problem because then we might see like a ChatGPT thing again where like ChatGPT is trying to grow horizontally, right? So they want to be able to do everything as much as possible. Because I was listening to like this Y Combinator
yeah,
like podcast, right? And then they were talking about how like when ChatGPT started like growing at like that rate, right? A lot of them tended to like be afraid, right? Because they were like, I might spend a lot of time in building like this product, like this AI product, and then I wake up tomorrow and Microsoft or ChatGPT have built it as a feature, right? So like, so
yeah,
so like that's the thing, right? And if they give the fall, and that's the thing about like commercializing certain aspects and trying to like sell certain things,
yeah,
because if you do that, your focus might shift to that and then like shift away from the research, right? Because what we've seen is that there's a group of a small group of people that were only focused on their
yeah,
research, right? And this is what they were able to like achieve, right? But we don't know what ChatGPT's research team has in store next, right? And we all know that like is an incredibly talented
yeah,
team, but like from what we know now is that maybe because of their need to commercialize and like grow horizontally, right? They might have like forego certain aspects of
yeah,
research and like those strides, and then like DeepSeek or China have caught up, right? And so those are things that they have to look at if they in their bid to sustain or their bid to gain like revenue or money in moving
yeah,
forward.
yeah, yeah. Interesting, because I've always wondered, like, how do you get up, put in so much work, and say it's out there for free? Like, it's out there for free. How?
There's always an incentive.
Yeah, like how?
There's always an
How?
incentive.
How do you tell me this story?
Yeah.
Like,
The incentive will come out. We are all here. We'll see the incentive.
eventually we'll see.
OpenAI, we are non-profit.
Yeah, exactly. You are not profit, you are not profit. Then eventually they're like, some old man says, guys, I was wrong. I was wrong when I wrote those articles. Now we want to be
I
purpose.
think that's one of the issues. Yeah, I think that's one of the issues Elon Musk has with them
Yeah.
has with some Altmans like all those things. I think Elon Musk is like Charlie, like come up with who you are already and like let us
But
let
that's
us
the
be
thing. I think
right.
according to Sam, Elon wanted them to be for profit right from the start. And Sam was principled to
Oh,
be non-profit. So Elon's frustration is,
non-profit.
why the hell do you defend all those principles in the past? And then when it's convenient for you, you flip and come and tell me that you're all of a sudden for profit. Sorry. You guys,
I mean, so we'll see. With DeepSeek,
yeah,
we'll see.
we'll see. Maybe very soon they also come up and say, guys, we lied. We don't want to be open source anymore. Anyway,
Maybe.
um, but one interesting thing about the AI race is that it's not just been about chatbots, right? And making these chatbots and like research thinking models. It's also been about achieving a higher end of intelligence, either to even reach the level of human intelligence or surpass it, right? Some experts believe that the distillation model that you mentioned earlier, and here's where we explore the distillation model that DeepSeek used, which is essentially not starting from scratch, but like you described, also using existing models to train newer models and reduce the amount of time they go through this process. So it's really accelerated the process of creating higher intelligent models. People start asking, or myself, I was thinking, it's one of the things that came up in, how close are we really to merging artificial intelligence with biomedical intelligence or human intelligence in a way that will start to see much more humane robots, humane chatbots. We see all these. Maybe we start to see all these things that we see in movies that depict a tech savvy world of the highest order. Like, how close are we? Does distillation make it much closer than it previously was?
I mean, I think what distillation can do is to, in my view, like democratize like the ability to be able to train like a wide variety of
Okay.
models, right? So take for example, you take a model that is only focused on like legal knowledge and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So it has all the proprietary information from like case laws and what have you, right? But it needs to be able to improve upon its reasoning
Yeah.
capability, right? So we take a model that has like extraordinary reasoning ability,
Oh,
and we distill that reasoning into that model,
okay.
right? And we can do this across a wide array of like various like industries, right? So we can have like groups like OpenAI, like DeepSeek, if they become very big, like improving upon the reasoning capabilities of their models,
Yeah.
right? And then if they are open source like DeepSeek is, then we can then have the ability to be able to distill, because that's
Oh,
literally
okay.
what it is. Basically, like the whole distillation process, like we are taking out the bits that we need
Yeah.
from it. So if we take out that reasoning ability from that model and infuse it into smaller models, then we can be able to grow a wide array of things. But I think the question, right, on like us being able to reach that technologically advanced world then has to stem from solving other problems outside of the computation part of
Yeah.
it, right? Because we are still bound by the laws of physics, right? That is why that is why things like the Apple Vision Pro failed,
Yeah.
right? Because it was too chunky, like it was too chunky. People would prefer like having like glasses like this that would be able to do all those
Yeah.
things. But once again, because of the laws of physics, we are unable to like put things into those small form factors, and it goes to things like robots and stuff like that. So even now, like in San Francisco, there are a lot of hard tech companies that are like thinking about like the craziest things that like we could possibly imagine. But the only reason why they are not releasing or they are not launching is because of the laws of physics, like getting the hardware
Yeah.
right. We can get the software
But the
right, but
hardware,
then getting the hardware
yeah.
right. Yeah. So if we are able to develop the computation so fast, we can get to a point where instead of racking our brains to try to overcome these problems,
Oh, okay.
we give these problems to AI, and then they can be able to solve them for us, like computationally, and then we can be able to get there, right? But right now, what is bounding us, lots of physics, and maybe probably we are not there yet. We've
Yeah.
not yet reached like the AGI points yet, but we are getting there. I think we are closer than we were like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, or even like hundreds of years ago.
Interesting. Ah, I thought we only hated physics in the classroom. I didn't know it's the hatred has come into the real world as well. Physicists who are listening to this kind of tell me, hey, physics is great, physics is nice. And still cries, preventing that from existing in metaverse. But the other bit that was interesting to me was because there's always been this conversation about when AI actually is able to merge with human life, the scale of improvement that we could see, right? Because imagine a world where you have medical assessments or diagnosis that is purely done by AI, how it could change the war front for a war-ridden zone where human doctors cannot go. Could you fly in an AI drone with medical capabilities to assess people and predict medication that it has within its toolbox? Like, how does it change the landscape of humans' ability to deal with very, very hard problems? And I think even like we all say governments are terrible at making decisions. It's also because they take risks all the time. There's no perfect decision based on the knowledge that we have. And so how does the infusion of AI into governance change things? Like having access to a wide range of data, assessing all the possible options and determining the road at this particular point is the highest priority based on the number of accidents we've had this year. The hospital at this particular point is the highest priority based on the number of patients that depend on it, based on some essential services that they run that nobody can run and all that. Maybe you need this specific type of hospital in this locality because this particular activity is driving this brand of sickness there, and you need to fix it. Maybe all these things get to elevate not just by creating that one entity of maybe a human merged with AI like robot or something, but the infusion into the already things that we have to do, the difficult tasks that we have to do, could really elevate the quality of human life. Because to be very honest, I know that the AI wouldn't have recommended the building of a national cathedral in Ghana. At least that one, me, I know. That one, at least I know. Charlie.
I think we don't even need. I think for some of these things, I think even for some of these things, we might not even need AI.
Yeah,
Is the ability to like manage
data.
data, like a simple database will be able to like tell. Yeah, but I think the problem, right, and what I think AI can't solve is that things like empathy from
Yeah,
like empathy and all of those things that like leaders like or governments like take into account before they decide like to take decisions. I'm not saying empathy is bad, but I'm
yeah,
saying there are other sentiments that they look at before they make decisions. So it doesn't really make their decisions it doesn't really make their decisions like as objective as
yeah,
possible, right? So probably if you're able to remove all of those things, we can be able to get to a point where we can have governments making like the most objective decisions,
yeah,
right? And even take a look at like Doge, Elon Musk with like the Department
yeah,
of Government Efficiency thing, right? If we're able to cut out a lot of these government spending, right, we can be able to reduce like a lot of things because take the whole road thing, like going to look at like the most safe roads and all of those
yeah.
things. Even for that thing to happen, the level of bureaucracy that will be
Bro,
involved in getting people to go
respect.
and survey the road in itself,
Yeah,
to getting like you get it. So if we're able to cut out cut out a lot of those things, we can't see a world where then government spend less to be able to do more. And I think that's in itself is one that would benefit a lot of like the populace.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One final question before we end the episode. Why should anyone listening to this or anyone in the outside world care about an AI revolution? Like, yeah, me, the only thing maybe I use it to do is ask ChatGPT to do my homework or do my assignment, or I ask it to write an essay. Like, I ask it to write cover letter for some application that I'm doing, or or or, or I ask it to summarize a book for me or something. But it seems like this AI thing is much bigger, especially to those involved in it and to those who are in the tech world. So why should the ordinary person be paying attention to the AI revolution or to care about it to some degree?
So I think first off, right, we need to understand that everything favors the early adopters, right?
Yeah,
So when you get into something early, you tend to like reap a lot of the benefits. So take crypto for example, people that entered into it early, like started reaping a lot of
yeah,
benefits. Take the dot com era for example, people that got into it early, hedged a lot of funds on dot com, like reaped a lot of
yeah,
benefits. Same thing as AI. This is a revolution that you can't afford to not acknowledge, right? You need to be able to see this and say, this is something that can change the way of life of people as it is, right? And we have to understand that now it's not just large language models that exist. Like now people are developing AI agents to the point where you can just give it an instruction and you don't even have to operate your laptop or your computer and it's going to do everything for you.
yeah,
So it can like track flight plans and everything for you, right? So then this begs the question, right? With increasing industries like this, right? Where we find ourselves, right? If it says, if the reports on like the jobs, I think I've forgotten the name of that report. That was on like the like new jobs or new employment
yeah,
or something like that, right? It says that a lot of work people are going to jobs are going to be displaced. Then it means that what next? Because we have to understand if we take an active look into these things, then it means things like security, things like managing data, things like governing, things like
yeah,
policy, all of those things will boil down into like managing it. So it's not just going to be people like the technical people developing the AI somewhere, right? It's going to like look at people like trying to secure these systems. It's going to look at people trying to build policy around these things. And to be able to build policy or regulate these things, you need to be able to understand what they are, right? If you don't understand it, then you are going to be lag
yeah.
behind. You are going to lag behind. And that's why I said that thing. That's why I said that thing on my status the last time that my government, I'm sure someone in my government, people in my government don't even know what a GPU is, right? And like it's worrying,
Bro,
right?
worry,
Like
worry,
it might be it's very
worry
worrying.
about the fact that they've heard of DeepSeek. Don't worry about the fact that they know what a GPU.
Like it's worrying, right? Because when you look at a lot, and I think that's something I'm very passionate
Yeah,
about because right from Huawei, like I had the chance to like go to like very rural areas to connect, give them access to internet
yeah,
connectivity. It will shock you to find out that there are certain areas in Ghana that don't have access to to be able to make place a
Yeah.
phone call, right? And like it's increasingly like
Yeah.
problematic. So then that means that what leaves, like where is the African continent going to be,
Yeah.
or like a lot of like marginalized areas going to be when these things like go way ahead
Yeah.
of them? Because first industrial revolution came, we sat down. Second, third, fourth, to you sit down. No, come on. Like so, these are things that we have to like pay
But
attention
the
to.
fourth, we've
But I
already sat
think
down.
like generally everybody. But like
The fourth,
so
we've already sat down. So,
but I'm just so like these are like some of the things that we have to like look at,
yeah.
right? And then like pay attention to. And I think when we're able to do this, like we can be able to like grow our economies, all the good things that will happen, stable
Sorry.
governments, economies, like all of
me,
those things.
me, my unofficial position of the country. Yen ton yen chiskano. But then the country
I still have faith. I still
the
have faith.
country is in debt. So if we sell it, we'll share the debt, not the profit. So let's keep it.
Oh, oh,
Let's keep it for now.
oh, I still have faith. I still have faith in the
Yeah, I
country.
mean,
I mean, the young crop of people are doing very well. So
yeah,
let's see.
I think like with more seriousness, Ghana has a lot of potential. It would come around. And the thing about a country's growth is we always have to experience the worst to know how low not to fall again. And so essentially we sort of need to experience the lower seal, the floor level to set it there. So that's what eventually happens, which means going down there is usually not fun, but it's a necessary part of the country's growth. And then people can do that and say, we
Yeah.
never want to return to this particular point again. And that reference point becomes like an institutional memory for politicians, for everyone who is involved, and like that becomes a goal to avoid. But yeah, like you saying that people don't have internet. See, my hometown, my actual hometown, there's a particular tree. There's a particular tree. I don't know whether if they cut that tree, anybody can make call in that hometown. There's a particular tree under which people have to go for the network bars to load and then for
God.
them to make a call. If they walk 1 second or 5 seconds or 1 minute away from that tree, you can call them for a whole year. You never reach them. So the way they do it, leave them a message so that when they go under that tree, the message will load. Then they will know that you want to talk to them, so they will call you. If you don't get the chance to call them when they are by some chance under that tree, bro, forget about it. So yeah, it's a big part of it's a big part of the world that we need to try and fix in Ghana. But this has been a really really nice
Mhm.
conversation and with you, Brain, and thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. And that's it for this episode today. Like we've unpacked a lot of things about the rise of DeepSeek, roasting our motherland for some for some portions of it, but we've looked at exactly how it's disrupted the financial market and sparked geopolitical conversations as well. So make sure you subscribe to the Shaft podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, on YouTube, and wherever you listen to your podcast. Don't forget to leave a review, and it helps reach more listeners as well. So share your thoughts. Let us know what you think about some of the controversial things that we've discussed so far. So thanks for tuning in, and see you on the next episode.